When Resident Evil games are ranked, Resident Evil 0 is almost always near the bottom, and I don't know why. I feel like Resident Evil 0 is one of the most underrated Resident Evil games you need to try before Resident
This
Evil
is
9.
Officer
In this
Taylor from
short mini
Stars
review,
Bravo
I will
2.
be going over why
Please
I think that
identify
you should play
yourself.
Resident Evil 0 and why I
Someone there.
personally rank it as a mid to mid-high tier Resident Evil game. It doesn't deserve the hate that it gets. First, what is a horror game without atmosphere? I think that in my opinion, Resident Evil 0 is pure survival horror. I believe that the train opening sequence, the first sequence in the game, is one of the strongest introductions in the series. There's like tight corridors, limited ammo, and it gives you that classic pre-rendered tension that makes every door feel dangerous. You don't know what's on the other side, especially how it's a classic Resident Evil game.
What
And
just
gameplay
happened?
wise, it feels like a
they were
classic
dead.
Resident Evil game as well. It sort of has a modernized tank controls where you have like, that fixed camera angle and you're moving around the room, but with the remastered version, it's not wonky like those old Resident Evil games that you could play on like the PS2 or something. It feels modernized and it feels great. A big controversy that this game has is the dual character system. So I don't want this mini review to go into spoilers, but you do have two characters that you play as. The first one, Rebecca Chambers, and the second one, Billy Coen. And you will control these characters simultaneously. You could switch back and forth, and it's almost like a co-op game. But your other character is AI, unfortunately. And a big complaint that I had when playing through the story was they would often do like dumb stuff. They would waste all my ammo, or they would just get eaten by the zombies or walk into zombies, or I would lose them because I would walk too fast far away and they would fall behind. But other than those technical issues, it is a very unique experience. Obviously, it doesn't do the co-op system as good as probably like Resident Evil 5, but that doesn't mean that this game should be thrusted all the way down, to the lower end of the spectrum. Some of the stuff you'll be doing with Rebecca and Billy in real time was very ambitious for its time. You could do things like split them up and solve puzzles together, and oftentimes you must do that for a lot of the puzzles. Or you could use one to cover the other. It adds sort of like a tactical layer that most early Resident Evil games didn't have. It's not perfect, but it's very bold for its time, and it's something, you should play. You could also simultaneously control them at the same time, like, as if you had two controllers. Like, you could use one stick to move Rebecca and the other stick to move Billy. And visually, the remastered version still looks fantastic. The lighting, the environments, the grimy industrial design, it still holds up surprisingly well. And the soundtrack is also very good. It's very subtle, eerie, and tense. And I believe that this has one of the best save room themes in the Resident Evil franchise. But the game isn't without its faults. One of the most controversial mechanics in this game is the absence of the item box. Now, you guys know that in Resident Evil, there's a lot of backtracking, a lot of items for you to collect, and you always have very limited inventory space. So instead of teleporting items between, magical storage crates like the item box, you have to physically drop items on the ground. And, it's also very inconvenient too, You only have about 6 slots in your inventory space per character, so 6 for Rebecca, 6 for Billy, and you can't transfer items. There's Without going into much spoiler, there's a specific section in the game that needs a specific weapon called the hook shot, and you're gonna repeatedly need that weapon to progress throughout different sections of the game. And one of the sections is even like 2 hours since like you used it before, but there's no indicator that you're gonna need to use that weapon again to get to that area. So what ends up happening is you ended up dropping that item because frankly it's useless against the zombies and it takes up 2 inventory spaces. And that's a common theme of this game. There's a lot of things that take up 2 inventory spaces. And with that, you only have 4 left. And if you have no item box to transfer these items, then it becomes one of the biggest hassles of going back and backtracking just to pick up items, or having to leave items on the floor. What I ended up doing on some of my saves is I would go into like a save room and just leave items on the floor to have it there for later, and I would run back and forth, and I would have all my items in the save room. But obviously it doesn't transfer to other save rooms. I gotta go to the exact location, and that's an inconvenience. So if you're going through this game, you have to, manage your inventory very strategically. You have to plan your routes and remember where you left things, and you gotta commit to decision. It forces survival horror to actually feel like survival horror. So you could take it as a good thing or a bad thing. And going into the story, Resident Evil 0 had a risky job. It had to expand the Resident Evil lore without breaking what fans already loved. And while it's not the most emotionally explosive narrative in the series, it does something very interesting when it comes to both of these characters. It humanizes Rebecca Chambers instead of just being like, the rookie STARS member medic from the first game, because she's forced into a brutal survival situation on her own, and you could see her background. You actually watch her grow from like inexperienced to capable in real time, and that arc makes the events feel grounded. On the other hand, Billy Coen, the second character, he adds to the dynamic because he's not, just a superhero like guy. He's a fugitive with a murky past. Their partnership feels practical. It's not romanticized at all, although the community would say otherwise. Two people stuck together because survival demands it, and that's, relatability. It's just two strangers trying to stay alive in this scenario, this zombie scenario, and that makes the story feel more intimate instead of cinematic. Now, in terms of gameplay length, I clocked in around 10 hours of gameplay, but I could see people beating it as early as 8 and as long as, 12 to 13 hours. It depends on how cautious you are. I didn't feel like it overstayed its welcome. It doesn't drag into, filler territory where, it, goes on and on and on and on. And because of the inventory system and enemy placements, replaying it actually feels different once you understand how to route efficiently. And as for other modes, it's not really packed with extras. It does have, the main story, and there's also this Albert Wesker mode where you could play as kind of like overpowered versions of the main characters, and they're technically Albert Wesker fight or something. And it's just a fun little mode that you could go through the story with. So in the end, is Resident 0 flawless? No, I don't think so, not even close. Some of the enemies are annoying, and sometimes the pacing could dip in some areas of the game, and the lack of item boxes can feel very punishing. But I feel like the difficulty and that friction is part of the experience of the game, and it does have that classic feel. Resident Evil 0 isn't trying to be, like a Resident Evil 4 action heavy. It's not a very cinematic game. It's a very slow, methodical game. It's a classic survival horror game at its most deliberate. And I think maybe that's why it gets super overlooked. Because in a franchise that keeps evolving, Resident Evil 0 feels like the last true test of the old school design. It was one of the last games to have this old school design and before the modernization of the series. And I feel like if you approach it on its own terms, it's a very tense, atmospheric, and a surprisingly deep entry that deserves way more credit than it gets. Now, this was my mini review of Resident Evil 0, and I also have a video planned of a full retrospective of the story planned, but I got to replay the story because I want to get every single detail right and everything, because I last played this game on my PlayStation 5, but I bought it for my PC, and I'm going to record it and play it on my PC and make a retrospect video of you guys. I also have another one coming, but if you like these videos and if you enjoy these gaming content, please like and subscribe, and I'll be here for any gaming news and reviews and anything pop culture related. So please subscribe and like and comment what you think about Resident Evil 0 down below. Mr. Frosty Flames out.